Some people could say, now I could understand this too. Some people would say, well, why would God allow for a bunch of evil beings to live anywhere and just hang out? You know, I believe that everything has a purpose. Um, I believe that everything that God creates and allows to happen has a purpose. But definitely, there's a reason that God allows it to be that way. I personally believe that aside from having a place to contain their spirits until Judgment Day, which is in the future, the Bible talks about that. Their spirits need to be contained somewhere. Their consciousness needs to be contained somewhere. Um, and in that dimension of sin, that's where they reside. That's where their consciousness resides. I've seen it myself. I know that that's where they reside. We also know that there's a place called hell. That's probably an even lower dimension. And that is a separate issue altogether. We can get into that in the future. But right now I want to talk about the dimension of sin, which is not necessarily hell. No, they're two separate places. The dimension of sin is a dimension where you can go when you're sinning. And okay, now this is important because there's been movies made like this where I can't really think of, kind of like Back to the Future would be a good example, or something like that, where your body is the same, your face looks the same. Okay, we wake up, our house looks the same, we go outside, things look relatively the same, but actually they look different, a lot different. I'll explain that in a second. But when you're sinning, okay, when you're sinning, you go into the dimension of sin. So in other words, let's say I smoked a cigarette right now, because okay, now not only is that a sin against the body, okay, we know from the Bible we want to take care of our temple. And by the way, I have smoked cigarettes in the past, so everybody who's ever smoked a cigarette knows what I'm talking about. If I smoked a cigarette right now, let's say 3 cigarettes. Let's just say 3 cigarettes within an hour. If I was to go walking outside, I would literally be my consciousness would have shifted because of the chemicals, because of the alchemy, the black magic that's inside of the cigarettes. My consciousness would have shifted. Okay, so I would be in the dimension of sin. So when I go outside, the sky would look a little gloomier than normal, a little gloomier. And not only that, when I would walk down the street, those beings whose consciousness it resides in the dimension of sin, they would be coming out. Their bodies would be coming out. Suddenly they would be excited. They would have a purpose. I've seen it so many times in the past. They come out, they're riding around on their bikes or whatever they do, because they're on drugs too, and they're in the dimension of sin. They're doing drugs. They're cackling. They're making noises. They're mocking. When you walk past them, they're kind of laughing, scoffing. You know what I mean? And because you yourself, by smoking those 3 cigarettes, have gone into the dimension of sin. So in other words, the world still looks the same, pretty much. Cars look the same. Houses look the same. Apartments look the same. You name it. Okay, buildings look the same, but you're not in the same place. You're no longer in. There's 2 dimensions that I'm talking about here. One is when you're not sinning. That's one dimension. And the other one is when you are sinning. Okay? Or when you're doing drugs. When you're taking some kind of drug into your body. Because those alchemists, they know this. Those pharmaceutical companies and all those people, trust me, they know this. Satan has his people everywhere. And they know exactly what they're doing. And if they can get you to take something, they don't force it into your mouth. But if they can get you to take a pill, a medical pill, for depression or for this or for that, they know that they can alter your state of consciousness that way because you're doing it yourself. If they can get you to smoke a cigarette, nobody's shoving that cigarette in your mouth and lighting it. They know that they have to go by God's laws, so they have to wait for you to do it. But once you put that in there, once you breathe all that in there, then you go into that dimension. So what I'm saying is, while you're in this dimension, okay, you're walking around, everything seems relatively the same, right? But it's not. The people around you change. They change. You will notice it. You will see it. There will be less people, but more evil people. More people with bad intentions. Okay, they will be more aware of you, more focused on you. And they will, and you can, anybody can put this to the test. Anybody can put this, what I'm talking about, to the test. Now, anyway, the Bible says that the wages of sin ultimately lead to death. So, if you were to end up in a place like this, okay, like if you were to keep sinning and sinning and sinning, right? You would be inside of this dimension of sin. Okay, you would be there. You would notice if something just wasn't right, something is different. You would notice from when I'm not smoking cigarettes, or when I'm not taking this medicine, or when I'm not sinning, when I'm not committing. Okay, but when I am, the world changes. Literally, the whole world changes. The people, because you're going into another dimension. The people change. Their attitudes change. There's not good people aren't around as much. It's just mostly bad people doing drugs, doing violence, doing this, doing that. Why is that? There's a reason. It's not coincidence. It's because you're going into an alternate dimension of sin, the dimension of sin, which is an actual place. And yes, the valley of the shadow of death is describing this place. I believe that 100%. I believe it. So anyway, what is the way? Okay, so back to what I said about if you're in this place long enough, you could eventually lose your life. That's what the Bible says. The wages of sin is death. You're gambling with your life. If you're walking through that dimension long enough, and you're doing it let's say you do some kind of a drug every single day, okay, or let's say you're somebody that steals every single day, whatever. That means that every day you wake up, and every day that you go to bed, you're in the dimension of sin, and you don't even necessarily know. So while you're in that dimension, there are beings that are aware that you are there. And while they're aware of that, they want you to die. They want you dead. They want you gone. And they all know each other, most of them. I would say, well, from the times I've been in that place, I can tell you right now, most of them know each other, but not all of them seem to like each other. I guess that's the best way to describe it. I mean, they do seem to have a connection with each other in some way. There are many of them that know who you are, because you have to remember this dimension is worldwide. Once you go into it, it's worldwide. We'll get into that in the next video, though.